When you think about the global AI race, what comes to mind? Right? It's usually the American tech giants, these massive, world-changing language models. But what if I told you the real war, the one that's going to be far more profitable, isn't the one everyone's watching? Based on our deep dive into local Japanese sources, stuff you don't normally see in English, there's a huge strategic pivot happening. It's a quiet, calculated move that positions Japan not just to compete, but to absolutely dominate the next phase of AI. So let's get into it. To really get what's happening, you have to understand that there aren't one, but two AI wars being fought right now. On the left, you've got the infrastructure war. This is the brute force, capital-burning game of building bigger and bigger data centers. It's a game the US is winning, hands down. But then, on the right, there's the application war. This one's completely different. It's all about precision, about specialized knowledge, and most importantly, about unique proprietary data. And this is where Japan is quietly building an advantage that might just be impossible to beat. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Japan? Lagging in AI? That's the common perception, right? I mean, you don't hear about a Japanese version of ChatGPT making headlines. But that's because you're looking at the wrong battlefield. The reality is, this isn't a failure to compete. It's a deliberate pivot away from a fight they knew they couldn't and shouldn't win. What looks like inaction from the outside is actually a brilliant strategic choice. It's a decision to completely sidestep a war of attrition. Think about it. Trying to outspend US hyperscalers on data centers would be financial suicide. It would take trillions of dollars. So Japan simply chose not to play that game. Instead, they're focusing all their energy on a different front, one where they hold all the cards. And that brings us to the absolute core of this whole strategy, Japan's unseen and, I'd argue, its most valuable asset. See, as AI evolves, it's shifting from just processing text and images on the internet to actually interacting with the physical world. And when that happens, the most critical resource is no longer web data, it's physical data. So what does that actually mean? Well, let's look at the first key concept, vertical AI. Forget about AI that can do everything. This is about AI that does one specific job incredibly well, like performing surgery or optimizing a construction site. It's trained on proprietary, non-public data that you just can't scrape off the internet. The barrier to entry here isn't a billion-dollar GPU cluster, it's getting access to that unique data in the first place. And the second, even cooler concept is physical AI. You can also call it embodied AI. The difference is simple. A chatbot is like a brain in a jar. It exists only in the cloud. But physical AI has a body. It lives inside a robot, a car, or a medical endoscope. It sees, feels, and interacts with the real world. And that requires a completely different kind of intelligence. Okay, take a look at this chart, because it lays out the whole argument perfectly. Up top, you've got web data. The US and China dominate, sure, but anyone can copy it. But as you move down, look what happens. Physical and sensor data. Suddenly, Japan and Germany are in the lead, and it's much harder to replicate. And then, at the very bottom, kinematic data, the data of how things physically move. Japan absolutely dominates, and it's nearly impossible to copy. This isn't just data. It's the literal ground truth of how the physical economy works. All right, so that's the theory, but talk is cheap, right? Let's get into the real proof out in the field. We're going to look at some incredible companies that have turned their dominance in the physical world into these uncopyable data moats. This is where you see Japan's strategy really come to life. First up, let's talk about Komatsu. You probably know them for their giant yellow construction machines, but you should stop thinking of them as a hardware company. They're not just selling heavy equipment, they're digitizing the earth itself. Think about this. A self-driving car collects video data from a paved road. That's interesting. But a Komatsu excavator is collecting data on the soil resistance as it digs, the exact hydraulic pressure needed to move a specific boulder, and detailed 3D maps of entire mines. This is messy, complex, high-fidelity physical data that a software startup in Silicon Valley could never, ever hope to replicate. And that's the real mine vendor here. They aren't just selling excavators, they're using them as sensors to build a digital twin of the Earth. A perfect virtual model of the real world where their AI can run millions of simulations to optimize everything before a single real shovel hits the dirt. Okay, so we've gone from the macro scale of the Earth down to the micro. Let's shift from dirt and rocks to the human body and see how the exact same principle is at play with a company like Olympus. They have a staggering 70% global market share in GI endoscopes. They're mapping a completely different but equally valuable frontier.
By controlling the hardware, the camera that goes inside the body, Olympus controls an exclusive, uncopyable data pipeline of millions of internal body images. Their AI, called ENDO-AID, acts as a real-time co-pilot for doctors, literally highlighting polyps the human eye might miss. This data is an impenetrable fortress, protected by market dominance and strict privacy laws. And this is the crucial point for anyone thinking about investing. The market might see a hardware company, but the reality? Olympus is the curator of the Google Maps for human anatomy. That's a massive disconnect between perception and reality, and a huge opportunity.
For our last example, let's look at FANUC. You've probably never bought a FANUC product, but I guarantee you've used something their robots have built. They are the world leader in factory automation, the hidden nervous system inside the factories of Apple, Tesla, Toyota, you name it. Because FANUC's robots are inside these secretive, world-class factories, they have privileged access to the black box of global manufacturing. They're collecting terabytes of data on motor torque, tiny fluctuations in current, microscopic deviations in movement, all to predict when a part is going to fail before it actually does. That's how they can promise zero downtime. So what they're really doing is monetizing the secret know-how of the world's best factories. They're creating a universal physical AI for assembly, trained on a dataset that no pure software company could ever dream of accessing. So you have all this incredible, unique data. Now what? The obvious answer would be to send it all to the cloud, right? Wrong. That's the old way. The Japanese strategy is to build a fortress around something called Edge AI, winning by avoiding the cloud wars entirely. For this kind of physical AI, the cloud is actually a liability. Think about it. Do you want your self-driving car to have a half second of lag while it checks with a server 1,000 miles away? Or a surgical robot? No way! Latency can be disastrous. Plus, streaming all that data is impractical, and it creates massive privacy and security risks. The decision has to be made right there, on the edge, where the action is happening. And the absolute prime example of this strategy in action comes from Sony. As the undisputed world leader in image sensors, they've created something revolutionary. An eye that doesn't just see, it thinks. Just look at that number, 99%. Let that sink in. By putting an AI processor directly on the image sensor itself, it can understand what it's seen and send only the important information, not the raw video feed. It reduces the amount of data transmitted by 99%. That's a total game changer for privacy, for bandwidth, for everything. Sony is transforming from just a component maker into an edge AI platform. Okay, so let's pivot to the final crucial piece of this puzzle. It turns out that what most analysts see as Japan's biggest weakness, its aging population and shrinking workforce, is paradoxically its greatest strength in this new AI race. In the West, there's a lot of fear about AI taking jobs. But in Japan, which is facing a massive structural labor shortage, AI is seen as a savior. It's a necessity. This means there's almost no social or political friction to deploying automation everywhere. The entire country has effectively become a real-world laboratory for figuring out how humans and AI can work together. And this chart right here, this brings it all together, especially for investors. On the left, you see how the market values these companies today as boring, old-world hardware makers. But on the right, that's their potential once the world wakes up and re-rates them as what they truly are, AI and data leaders. This gap isn't just a gap, it's a massive valuation arbitrage opportunity. So let's be clear, Japan isn't behind in AI. It's just been waiting quietly at the starting line of a completely different race. The infrastructure war was about brute force. The application war will be one with precision, with unique physical access, and with uncopyable data. That war has already begun. So the only real question left is your portfolio positioned to win it?